Hello, this is Old Dad broadcasting from the mountains of East Tennessee. I wanted to create a tutorial series on how to create a route in Dovetail Games Train Simulator program. So welcome to my first attempt at doing that. If you're looking for a fast-paced, tell me how it's done and cut to the chase kind of video, you better just go find another source because that's just not my style. As I talk and work my way through this, in the background is a video of a train operating over the route I'm creating in Train Simulator. I don't have it available to the public yet, but I hope to make it available when it's completed as a freeware download sometime in the future. It's a representation of the Nashville, Chattanooga, and St. Louis, Louisville and Nashville, CSX, Cowan Pusher District, and Tracy City Branch in southeast Tennessee, United States of America. So we'll let that run for a bit in the background while I talk to you about my thoughts about creating a route. First, I want to say that I'm just an easygoing guy from the South who enjoys trains, and I've worked in the railroad industry my entire life in various capacities, from working on the track to repairing equipment in the shop, and I'm also a card-carrying, certified locomotive engineer on both steam and diesel locomotives. I'm one of the lucky guys who turned a childhood dream into a career. Thanks to the grace of God and His loan to me of my talents, I have a great career so far. I've been able to come home safely to my family every day, and I still enjoy my job. I don't like drama, so before you begin to write comments telling me how stupid I am or how worthlessly boring my videos are, take your fingers off the keyboard and go find someone else to complain to. I'm not a certified authority on this game. What makes it work? Which train simulator out there is the best or the worst? Which one you should buy? How your computer might work with it or not? And so forth. I also do not claim to be doing the best or simplest methods here, just how I do it and how I learned to do it, and I've achieved some success creating a route, as I will show you here. If you're an ace at this game and want to offer a suggestion to this old bonehead, I'll listen. Just always be nice to folks, please. I'm also not responsible for the damage you and your keyboard and mouse might do to your own rig if you click on the wrong thing. If you're interested in some tips and tricks that might help you navigate through this complex game and wind up with a creation that you can be happy with or even proud of, hang in there with me, okay? Alright. Well, we're looking at this route that I've created, and it's taken me some months to create, I'll just tell you. And anybody that's ever created a route knows what I'm talking about. There's a lot of things to do. You look out there as you see the train rolling through. I place the tracks. I help the program generate the terrain. All the trees and the bushes and everything are all placed by the creator individually, utilizing the tools that are available in the game. And that's kind of the whole purpose of my tutorials, is to try and give you some tips and tricks of how I learned to use what's available in the game to generate a route. It takes a lot of work, as you will see as we go through these tutorials over the coming weeks and months, and who knows, maybe even years if the game survives that long. One thing I'll say is have fun doing it. Don't get frustrated and mad, because this program will get you frustrated and it will get you mad. I suspect that all of us have faced some frustration with these simulator programs at one time or another, dealing with the various things that go wrong with them sometimes, crashes and things like that. So as we continue to look at the route that I've created here, I want you to see what kind of you can create, and this was all done from scratch using the program and the parts in it. This is a Cowan tunnel. There's a photograph, and there's my simulation. So you too can create these wonderful things, something that you can be happy with and enjoy, whether you decide you want to try and share it with other people or just enjoy it for yourself. That's my whole purpose in doing this, is to enjoy it myself and give me something to remember the good old days here in Southeast Tennessee. So we're going to dispense with this for the moment, and I'm going to fire the program up. Get out of this. Bear with me here as I navigate through things, and we'll get the Train Simulator 2021 fired up. There's the splash screen starting to come on, and this is a payware program you can acquire from the gaming site Steam. There's a ton of downloadable content available from Dovetail Games, as well as tons of free stuff on various websites from around the world. It all depends on what interests you. The quality of the sim is good. The graphics wise, I think it's still holds up pretty well, even though that the base program's from around 2009. Now for some folks, I know those are fighting words. I just said some will say that good old Microsoft Train Simulator is much better, or Trains is the only way to go. Well, those are a couple of other simulators that you can research out there. Well, I hear you, and I think in my case, this is the one I got to playing around with, and I just stuck with it. I understand if your allegiance is with one of the other simulators, and I'm not going to try and convince you to choose one over the other. As I said before, I don't have a dog in the fight of one versus the other, because I've never tried Trains. I know it's out there. I know some good folks who are making some incredible looking content for Trains, and the folks in Open Rails, the successor to Microsoft Train Simulator, are still keeping that good old program interesting with some new content. You got to do your own research and settle on a simulator you like. So if you're undecided about what to do, you should uncouple from my train right now and go do some more research before I bore you some more. So, as a little history lesson, along with about the year 2000 or so, Microsoft came out with their train simulator. It was great for the day, and the graphics were fair for the day, and it was user friendly, I think. And a whole host of folks made some great routes and downloadable content for that simulator. Then Microsoft decided to not develop the content further and left it to the gaming community to further the progress of that simulation. Or not. So you can still run that sim, and Open Rails has made some interesting improvements to the original, but then along came Trains in the mid-2000s, and finally around the late 2000s, Rail Simulator came along, which became RailWorks, and finally this program, Train Simulator. And I settled on this Train Simulator, I guess because I just watched some YouTube videos of content. I just settled on that. And I suppose that's how I came to be where I am right now. And I haven't looked back. Lately, Dovetail Games has released Train Sim World, which is driven by a phenomenal graphics engine and has some real-world feel to it. It's still developing, and I don't know that much about it yet. I do have it. I have run some of the trains on there, and it looks real good for sure. So a little word about simulators in general. There aren't any of them that are totally real life, of course. They're just a simulation. They can be in the ballpark with some aftermarket tweaking and physics upgrades from folks who know a lot more about that sort of thing than I do. You're not going to find that here on my tutorials. I used to tweak the physics in Microsoft Train Simulator to help make the simulation more realistic. In changing something power-wise or braking-wise, usually reading a good tutorial online, and that stuff's still out there, and you can find all sorts of great things to tweak all of these simulators. There were numerous guys out there creating, files that you could import and improve the physics of the game, and that helped a lot. I've found Train Simulator to be no different in lacking the realism I'm intimately familiar with as a railroader. I mean, even though I play this simulator, it lacks some of the realism. I can't speak for trains, but I assume it's the same. I haven't run trains. That's TRAINZ, by the way. Train Simulator World still has real world physics issues, on the routes that I've run on that. You say, well, what am I talking about when you say physics? Well, it's like taking a loaded coal train up a steep grade at 30 or 50 miles an hour with the diesel in power notch number 3. That's just not real world. Anybody who's observed a train climb a hill knows that there's a whole lot of shaking and growling and a lot of power being expended to get a train pulled over a mountain. So there's what I'm talking about physics not being real world. And same thing with the braking, going down grade and having a minimal application of brake stop a train, or using a locomotive independent brake to stop a locomotive consist, and it takes a half mile to stop the consist. That ain't real world, guys. So the obvious question is, why even bother to run the sims at all? Well, I'll tell you, they're still fun to play with, and you learn how each locomotive reacts in the sim, and everyone can be different. And that's also real world. Every locomotive I've ever run in my career had its own idiosyncrasies, and you had to get used to it, just like driving a different car every day. What makes simulations more fun is if you can run a train on a route you're familiar with or have enjoyed in real life at some point. It's fun to see something simulating something you're familiar with. Taking a tour around the world to some other route's also fun, seeing what the mountains and things look like. So depending on how serious you are with this, you can create as detailed a route as you want, or you can sort of do it sort of like an old-time model railroad, where you just had a 4x8 sheet of plywood and you laid some train tracks on it and you ran a train around in a circle. All depends on how involved you want to be. That's one thing I'll say about this type of modeling simulation. I can build as big a model railroad as I want right here, as opposed to what I could build in my basement or in a spare room of my house, like a lot of folks who are into the model trains do, which I also have those, but I've never had time to really create one. I'm able to create the model railroad I never was able to create right here in Train Simulator. Okay, so let's get to some of the basic things that you need to know. Once the game is fired up, here's the current splash screen that comes up for Train Simulator 2021. Each year they update the splash screens and show some of their new products that they have there all the time. So you're familiar with that if you've been running the simulator using the routes that come packaged with the simulator. But obviously here, this is the quit game button. You know about that. Over here is where you get access to the Dovetail Games community forum. And then over here we have the settings button. Some of these features become very important for what you're doing in creating a route. In talking about performance and whatnot of the game, one of the things that you've got to consider are these settings. So again, I can't tell you what settings work best for your computer that you have, that you're operating the simulator on. In order to get the best game performance, you've got to do some tweaks to some of these things sometimes. If you're any kind of a gamer, you already have, probably already have a rig, a computer that will handle high loads on graphic settings, and the action and detail that's going on in the simulation won't affect your performance. The best thing I can tell you is that if you're a novice and you don't know much about computers or what's inside your computer rig, do some research online and learn how to check your computer's capabilities such as processor, RAM, video card, what Windows operating system you're working on, and tweaks that can be done to that to make them perform better when playing games, and other things that improve game performance that you can find. There's a million websites you can go out there and learn how to make improvements. In particular, related to this game, stick with stuff that you can find out on Railworks America or the UK Train Sim websites. That's where you'll generally find the best information for this particular simulator. I doubt that there's an out-of-the-box computer out there anywhere that would handle the graphic loads of a simulation game without some kind of tweaks for performance. All of this to say that here's where you have options within the game to improve performance and appearance of the simulation. Usually, if your rig is older or slower, you have to dial down the quality of the world graphics in order to not affect how the train performance looks. The frame rate is the term used to describe how quickly the game renders the scenery and how realistic the train looks moving through the scene. Low frame rates produce a jerky appearance and low rendering rate of the scenery. The more things in the simulation, let's say you've got a fairly decent sized yard and you've got lots of train cars sitting around, and you've got lots of trains meeting and passing, and you've got trees and bushes and buildings and tracks and lighting and sounds and weather effects. All of these things have to be compensated for by the processor to make it all happen. And when you get all these things going on, you can get some pretty low frame rates. And you may have already experienced this in your gaming through this simulation. You need a fast rig is the bottom line regarding performance. You need one with a fast processor. You need an independent graphics card that has a lot of capability there. NVIDIA is the card that I'm using. Nothing ruins the fun worse than a crash where the program just closes in the middle of something, like you're running a scenario and the program just crashes, or you're creating and you've just created this fabulous looking whatever, a rail yard, scenery, you fail to save periodically or regularly to save the work that you've done, and all of a sudden you get a crash. You get the old whoops, something happened here, and the game just stalls, or it falls off completely, or it locks up. Whatever the case may be, you can have all sorts of problems. So go do the research. Search some of the forums on the game. Ask questions from someone online, someone who knows better than I do probably. And find out what tweaks you can do to your computer. I'll tell you that I'm running a 9-year-old computer with an NVIDIA graphics card, and that computer's pretty fast for its day, pretty good processor, and I still have crashes on rare occasion. It's the nature of the gaming platforms. Sometimes you ask it to start processing too much information and it just can't do it. It's one of the complaints that I've seen on some of the forums before, where people put a lot of effort into building a route and they finally just reach the limit because the game keeps crashing on them or they have problems. I don't know what the specific case that caused their game to crash, but I have had crashing problems where I'm trying to move through something too quickly, in the creation process, changing positions on the map or something like that, and sometimes it just can't process the scenery in that mode fast enough and it'll crash on me, and it does get frustrating, and I can see that. There's one route that I know of that the guy was doing some wonderful work. He had created a lot of stuff in the Northeast Corridor. Spent a lot of time on it. Has a lot of good videos that I found very useful on YouTube. Very helpful video tutorials. And he kind of had to put it down. I think he may be he might be starting to get back into the simulator arena again. But even with a decent computer rig, I still have some settings turned down to improve the performance of the simulator. Someday I'm going to invest in a bigger, better, stronger, faster bionic computer. That's a 1970s television reference to anyone who remembers the Bionic Man television show. And then maybe I can turn the settings up to full blast, as far as the quality of the graphics and whatnot. But we have some limitations set by the equipment that we're trying to use to run the simulator. So let's kind of scroll through these buttons here on the settings with the graphics. We look at master detail. I have that set on custom because I've tweaked a bunch of these things down here, and you can use a canned one, lowest, low, medium, high, highest. Resolution, I've got that set for my mode that I'm using right now, which is windowed, and it happens to be the highest one that I can have in the windowed mode. My monitor is actually larger than that, but in windowed mode, which you see where I am right now, this is the size window that I have. And what I would say is that there are two modes that I use, windowed and also full screen. If I'm going to run the game and enjoy it, I'll put it on full screen. If I'm going to work on the route, I generally have it on windowed mode because that allows me to open other things that I need for the route creation, other tools, other reference material. I do have a 2-monitor system set up so I can have lots of things open. And if you only have one monitor, what you're going to find is that a lot of times you're having to open and close the program. I'll have to minimize it and then bring it back, when I'm looking for some reference material that might be underneath. If I've got a profile chart or a photograph or Google Earth or something underneath. If you've only got one monitor, you'll be minimizing this. Well, it's very clunky to do if you've got it in full screen mode and you're trying to edit a route. So you definitely want to be in windowed mode, in my opinion, if you're creating a route. So that's what full screen, windowed. There's also borderless, and I've never used that or tried, so I don't really know what that does. You'll see that I've got some settings here, and that's what I found works best for me. Some things I have ticked, some things I don't, and that's based on what I have for the, I'm using the AP weather effects from the British outfit. I purchased those, and I really like those. And I have some things ticked or unticked based on what their recommendation was. You can click the default button. I'm not going to do that because it'll change all my settings, and that takes you back to what the factory setting is. You click on the advanced button, you get more quality. You see I have, since I'm doing custom, I have a lot of ticks down through here set up, a lot of sliders I should say, set up to certain densities that I found that works my game correctly. There again, you've got factory settings, lowest, low, medium, high, highest, custom, and then we have the anti-aliasing, and I'm not really certain what that does, but someone smarter than I'm sure can explain it online. I've never been too concerned about that. I think I have that set based on a recommendation from one of the products that I'm using in the game. Texture filtering, that's another case of I'm not really sure what's going on there, but all of those things affect the quality of what the world looks like, the scenery looks like. And someday maybe I can have them on the highest settings when I get me a newer computer rig. Again, some of these things are checked based on what products that I have ever recommended. You'll have to kind of learn those things on your own. I don't really know all the details of that, sorry, to be so pathetic and not able to answer any of those questions. But you can click the previous or basic, but don't click default here. And that takes me back to where we have this original screen that we started out on. And you look at gameplay. I'm running on expert controls. Simple controls is where it's very easy to run a train. I have some other things turned on. They're pretty self-explanatory there. The hints, auto fireman, have some things turned off. And you'll just have to kind of, read your manual on that. Audio, settings for the audio. Controls, there's some controls for the mouse and the keyboard, adjustments, so you can change your X, Y, vertices, and vibration on the mouse and different things. Okay, here we go. Here's something right here. We got to be real careful what you do right here. Here you got manuals that you can open up, clear the cache, and then reset progress and reset favorites. And that's where, internally in the game it begins to give you some ratings on what you've done and what games you've played, and you've seen all that. You got so many stars, or you got a gold, or you got a silver, or whatever. That ratings internally in the game. I don't pay any attention to that. But we've got this button right here. This is the biggie right here from my perspective on what we're going to do with creating a route. So don't push reset progress or reset favorites unless you want to clear out your ratings that you already have. So let's click on Google Maps. And what you'll see here, you have comes up a screen that tells us about the Google Maps API key. Again, I'm not going to get down too much in the nuts and bolts of what that all stands for, but basically, in order to use the Google Maps overlay on train simulators route creation tool, you need to go and get your Google Maps API key, and you have to apply for it and sign a bunch of gobbledygook that says this, that, and the other, and we all tick the box and say I accept and move on. But then what happens then is you're then able to import the data that you need for overlaying Google Maps over the route. So, and I'm going to show you. I'll be demonstrating how to use the Google overlay, and that's the fastest way to create a map, as far as I'm concerned, to create a route. So this map resolution button here, you'll see that's the size of area that you're going to bring in, the number of tiles or whatnot. No, the tiles are down here, I'm sorry. The resolution is the size, quality of it, I guess. The map type is satellite imagery. They have other versions. The satellite's the one I've ever used. Your zoom level, there's an adjustment for that. And then the tiles displayed, that's what I was trying to say earlier. I have the maximum number of tiles displayed. My computer will support that. And when we go into route building, and I'm going to do that here in just a moment to show you just briefly what Google Maps looks like when it's in the system, you get a certain number of tiles that will display 3x3, 5x5, or 7x7. I have the largest number because I like to see a larger area. My computer supports that. Yours might not. So you may have to tick one of the smaller tile sizes if your computer won't load it fast enough to suit you. So then the rest of the tick buttons here before I go show you Google in the game, you got credits, which tells you who worked on the game, and then Dovetail Live. I've never been there. I don't know what that does. So we'll just hit cancel here on settings, and we're going to go over here and we're going to click on build. Hang in there with me, guys. And you'll see here we click on build, we have route, scenario, or publish, and down here we have more buttons, which main menu takes us back to where we were. Okay, click on build again. Then we have delete, which will delete a route. Be real careful around that button. Don't if you've got a lazy finger that clicks buttons, don't click on some of these things. We could rename a route. We can create a new route, which I'll come back to because I want to talk about Google Maps again. We can clone a route, or we can edit a route. And what we're going to do is we're going to go down here. This is my route that I'm creating, Tracy City Branch. You can see all the other routes here in the route editor that I have loaded from Dovetail, you know, the downloads, the various ones that they have. That either came in-game when I purchased the game, or I've purchased afterwards. So we're going to go here to Tracy City Branch 01, which is my route. I'm going to click Edit. And we're going to watch the world spin around here for a minute as they give us some scenery from around the world, showing us some of the available routes that they have out there. And, you know, we could sit here and throw rocks at some of this and say, boy, that's doesn't look good, or does look good. I don't like to do that. I think anybody's effort is worth respecting, because once you've built a route, you'll understand what I'm talking about. It's an effort to build a route in one of these simulators. I suspect that in their tall office building, wherever they are, they have lots of folks that are working very diligently, and I wouldn't want to hurt their feelings, and I certainly would not want my feelings hurt. So I try to take the old premise: if you can't say something nice, let's not say anything at all. So, but I generally like all the things that I see. A lot of effort goes into doing it. So again, try and be nice when you're dealing with folks. You know, uplift people a little bit. Okay, here we are. We've just arrived, and the first time I entered the route editor and saw this, I thought, what in the heck? You know, and I had no clue what I was doing. I had watched various videos. Well, I guess the first time I entered it, I'm like, whoa, I better not go here, because I don't know what I'm doing. But yeah, I would recommend that you don't do any route editing until you learn what to do. So we come here and we see this great big smiling train there looking at us. It's on a little tile, I'll call it, and that is the point that your route will start every time you load it in, because that is the original latitude and longitude that you entered into the game simulation. Oh, look, I'm under the map. So, you know, this is where you start up, and you can see down the line there, I've got some more of those tiles hanging down here. Well, those are actually scenario tiles, where we have some various scenarios where I've got some things. Look behind me down here, I've got some more. And oh, there's a road hanging in the air. Well, that's because I'm in the process of editing some things. I actually lowered some terrain, and I haven't come back and corrected the road. And no, folks, this isn't what the final thing looks like. But anyway, I just wanted you to be aware that when you come in here, you'll be looking at this garage door tile here, whatever you want to call it. It looks like a locomotive. And that's the starting point that you start out with. And then everything that you do, you know, when you load the game in, you'll come here. Unless you go in and set up a bunch of markers, which I have not done. I'll just be honest with you, because it's a time-consuming process to me. And there's some great videos out there. They're helpful. And if you play one of the routes, you'll see you can start the train at siding X or station Y or town Z. Whatever the case may be, you know, those have a marker that tells the game where to go to start that. So markers are important, but I just haven't done a lot with markers. My little scenario is kind of small area-wise, so I just kind of come to the same place to start every time. Yes, there's a building floating in there. Look at that, amazing. It's a gas station in levitation. Okay, this is all an incomplete process here. This area that I'm working on, this scenic detail, is incomplete. But let's look at what happens when I navigate around. Let's talk about navigating just for a second. You know, you can use the arrow keys on your keyboard, and that drives you in and drives you out, up and down. Okay, left drives you that way, and right drives you that way. If you hit the control and then up, it moves you in that direction. If you hit the control and down, it moves you in that direction. If you hit the control and right, same thing, no difference. Okay, so, and if you hit the shift key, you go really fast. So I hit the shift and the up key, and that drove me into the ground really quickly. So the shift key gives you your speed, and the control key changes some of your direction. So anyway, here we are, and the area that I'm modeling right here, the railroad tracks have been abandoned since about 1973. So there's no way that it shows up in Google Maps. Google Maps, of course, uses a recent satellite image, and the great thing about Google is you can go and find old railroad grades years after they've been abandoned, looking at fence rows or roadbed that you can still see there, across a pasture, through a town. You can tell that, well, there used to be a railroad running there. So it's a lot of fun to just go on Google and look for old railroad grades. But if you're trying to build a train simulator, you kind of need some semblance of where that old grade was. So to get Google Maps into this, you have to hit Control and G. Now look what happens. We started the little blue circle spinning as it loads the game. Now this is a little town in Tennessee called Palmer, P-A-L-M-E-R. And in that town, it was a coal mining town, and the railroad came there in 1917 and then was abandoned by 1973 because the coal mines played out. It's an old story that people have heard all around the world. When the coal mines play out, they usually close up shop, and sometimes the town dies, and sometimes it hangs around as some other purpose. But in Palmer, this is basically where the railroad track ran, in Palmer. And there was a siding, a house track, and there was a Y, and then further up the line was the mining tracks, which I won't show you right now. But anyway, this is a current view of Google. This, you can go back, and this could be from 2017, 2018, 2019, depending on where you're at and how quickly Google updates maps. But there's the little town of Palmer, and you can see that the railroad tracks actually run through some existing buildings today where they were not in place years ago. But as you move, you see the little blue circles over here begin to populate. And if you notice, I'm unticking some things here with the little pins so we can see some things better. But as I move along, Google Earth continues to populate, and then behind me it begins to depopulate. So the further up you go, you'll see the whole 7x7 triangle there. Let's try that. I'll move it a little bit and you'll see it progressing along. But you see my railroad route underneath, and I'm using the mouse now to adjust and turn. You right click and grab a hold of the world and you can turn it. But I actually have that railroad running along the old grade that between the profile charts that I have and what I can see on Google Earth, I'm pretty darn close. In this particular case, all I have to go by is where that railroad was on Google Earth and the profile charts that I have. And by profile charts, let me tell you, lots of railroads out there created profile charts. It shows the elevations and the turns and the degrees of radius of turns and whatnot. And not every railroad in the country has that available out there for you to find. Now, when I say for you to find, I'm talking about you'll find it at a railfan bookseller, at a hobby show, online from a historical association. In this case, this is Louisville and Nashville, Nashville, Chattanooga, and St. Louis territory. This was abandoned long before the CSX ever came into existence. And the Louisville and Nashville Historical Association or Society has profile charts of the old Nashville, Chattanooga, and St. Louis Railway. So I was able to acquire those, and I work from those. And in another video, another tutorial, we'll find out how you use that to get the grades and the curvature and everything. And I have some other sources that I'll be going over, but I wanted you to mainly see Google Earth. Now over here on the right is the Google Earth panel. I want to pin it up. So if I take this slider, and if we note, a lot of times you'll go here, and if you highlight what you're looking at, it'll tell you what it does. In this case, it made a liar out of me, and it's not going to do it. So this slider changes the opacity of the Google Earth tiles. Look at that. That's pretty darn good, huh? Looks just like Google Earth on your computer. So you notice that I can change the opacity down to where I can see my track under there. Now the other thing that you get is sometimes when you're laying the route, you need to see what's going on maybe under your track or over your track. So you can raise Google Earth up and down with this slider. And there it is. I put it back down. It's now down where it's at track level. So a lot of times when you're editing, you can't see the track because the track's actually gone underground. But we'll talk more about that. So anyway, that's the controls for Google Maps when you look at them. And this is my preferred way to lay a route. Now, a bunch of guys are going to come on and they're going to say, well, why didn't you set markers, and why didn't you do this, and why didn't you do that? Well, it's kind of my way of doing it, I guess, and you can either like it or not like it. If it works for you, that's great. Fascinating little story right here. This little set of houses right here in real life are old railroad section houses. At least some of them are. And the section houses were built by the railroad, and where they had a track gang that actually worked a section of the line, say 5 miles, 8 miles, 10 miles, whatever the sections were broken up. You know, this little group of guys right here could be 3 guys and a foreman. They were responsible for seeing that this track was maintained, and they kept their tools. They had a tool house somewhere in one of the locations, and they had either a motor car or a push cart, and they took off on foot or on a motor car, and they went along and inspected the track and worked on the track, and eventually they had trucks that they would use, to get to where they needed to be with high rail equipment. But anyway, these little 4 houses here were part of a group of section houses alongside the Tracy City branch of the Nashville, Chattanooga, and St. Louis Railway. Just a little silly factoid that I find interesting. So anyway, there is kind of what goes on with Google Maps. And I brought you here and got headed off into the sunset with a lot of different things going on. You see Google, as you move along, it moves along with you. And you can say, well, wow, I see hills and I see trees and all this sort of stuff. We'll get to that. We'll get to that. It all has to be put on here somehow, and if you're creating a route, guess what? You get to do it. So you can see the roads. At some point I'll have to come and put a level crossing in here for, the people to get their automobiles across my railroad. And you can see back in there in the mountains. We'll run up here and let's take a look, just for the fun of it. This is a structure out of one of the games. You can import, anything that's in the game into the program and or into your route and use it. You just have to be careful about the copyright if you're going to try and publish it, or if you think you're going to wind up selling something. You got to be careful about the copyright stuff, and also, giving people credit where credit's due. I think that's important, and I'm always going to try in these tutorials to give folks some idea of where some of the things I found out came from, and sometimes I'll be generalized and sometimes I'm going to be specific. But here in Palmer there were 2 mines. This mine does not represent what was there, but I just stuck it there because it was what was available. Another big mine up there. It's incomplete. I don't have a structure for that one yet, but yeah. This was coal mining country in southeast Tennessee, and tons and tons and tons of the black rocks came out and went to power plants and factories and steel mills and just all sorts of places. And I probably have raised more questions than I've answered here, but hopefully as you watch my tutorials you'll learn how to use some of this stuff. So let's, at this point, I've made no changes. I'm going to hit escape. Oh, I'm sorry. I did the wrong thing. I'm going to hit the play button here. You see this is a drive button over here. All right. So when I hit that, it's going to ask me if I made changes, do I want to save the changes? In this case, I made no changes, so it did not ask me. So there I am back in the world without the advantage of the editor. I can look at what I've got. I can move to another location. The main thing is, if I do make changes, save, save, save. That's important that you save your work. So I'm going to hit escape, and we're going to look at the menu here. We have continue, which means I would continue to look around. I could save it. This gets into, you know, how the controller layout is, the keyboard layout. We're not worried about that. I can go back into the world editor if I want to do some more editing, and then I can hit save again, or play, the play button, and it puts me back. But in this case, I'm done with the world editor, so I'm going to go down here and I'm going to hit quit, exit. Yes, there we are, back at the splash screen. Okay, so we were over here on settings, and we were talking about tools and Google Maps. So again, there's some great videos out there that tell you how to go get the Google Maps. You need to go get that. And that's pretty important if you're going to lay the railroad according to my methods of putting the railroad down. Google is also involved in doing the markers on the route. Route markers are important. I'm not, you know, you hear me say I don't use route markers, but they are important. Eventually I'll have to put some route markers in this route in order to be able to assign, you know, scenarios that take me to certain stations and whatnot. But you know, if I want to start at a particular station, a scenario, I've got to have a marker that will take me to that location. So yeah, like I say, as we go along, you'll see me using the Google Maps and how to lay track and whatnot, and we're going to have some fun. And that's the whole point of this, is having fun. If it gets frustrating or aggravating to you, don't go here. It can be frustrating, it can be aggravating. And I'm going to be honest with you, I self-taught myself a lot of what's on here. I'll give credit to, I'm going to put a list of tutorials when I publish this, people that I've used their tutorials, and I think the world of their tutorials. And I don't communicate with these people necessarily, but I want to give them a shout out that says, hey, thank you so much for all the things you've taught me. But a lot of the things, you know, you watch them and they go through, they're so used to using the tool, and I apologize if I get ahead of myself and you don't know what I did and you need it, you know, to better explained. Watch the video again and maybe you can catch what I did. But you know, the learning to use the tools and how they react is something. It's like driving a train. Everyone is different, and you've got to feel it yourself. You can watch tutorials all day long, including mine, and until you try it yourself, you're not going to know how that tool or that application within the program is going to work for you. And there's lots of little nuances that I found out, and little tricks that I found out I'm going to try and show you that I think will make your you know, route creation easier. So I'm going to wind this tutorial up right now, and we'll come back with another one. But what I want to say is that there's a lot of planning that goes into deciding what you're going to do to create a route. You need to think about what you'd like to create. You need to think about what's available out there for you to use. For instance, if we look at this, you know, the Clinchfield Railroad there. That's one of my favorite railroads in the southeast of the United States. And you know, because Dovetail created that route, the out on the forums and places, there's lots and lots of download content that you can get for that now. So that's, you know, that's great. You know, try and create something that you've got content already out there. I don't even want to begin to think about creating my own locomotives or buildings, that sort of thing yet, because, you know, you've got to use the 3D software and things like that, and it's very time consuming, and I'm going to let lots of folks that are into that, that's their thing, do that for me, and I'm going to enjoy their work on my work, and I'll share my work with them, just like I'm willing to share my time, and eventually I hope to share my route with the world. So hope you enjoyed what we've talked about so far. Excuse me, and I'll be back with another tutorial. Good day.